The autumn nights in the Rocky Mountains carried a particular kind of loneliness that Jack Coleman had grown accustomed to over his 23 years as a long-haul trucker. Highway 24 stretched endlessly before him, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkness like a promise that never quite delivered what it seemed to offer. The steady rumble of his 18-wheeler's engine had become the soundtrack to his solitary existence, punctuated only by the occasional crackle of his CB radio, picking up distant voices of other drivers navigating the same empty roads. At 52, Jack had learned to find comfort in the predictable rhythm of highway life. Coffee that had been reheated too many times, diesel fumes that clung to his clothes, and the hypnotic dance of headlights against the windshield had become his companions. Tonight was no different. Or so he thought as he navigated the winding mountain road between small Colorado towns, his cargo of construction supplies secured in the trailer behind him. The fine rain had been playing tag with the fog for hours, creating a dreamlike atmosphere that made the familiar road seem almost otherworldly. Jack adjusted his worn baseball cap and reached for his thermos, the bitter coffee providing a small comfort against the chill that seemed to seep through the cab's windows. The radio hissed with static, occasionally catching fragments of distant conversations that faded as quickly as they appeared, like memories trying to surface from the depths of his mind. It was in the curve, just before the climb to Leadville, where the rocky elevations created natural shadows even in daylight, that Jack's routine night took an unexpected turn. Through the veil of rain and mist, he caught sight of something that made his heart skip a beat. A figure stood motionless at the roadside, arms wrapped around herself, her wine-colored dress clinging to her frame from the drizzle, long dark hair darkened by moisture and hanging like a curtain around her face. Jack's first instinct was to keep driving. 23 years on the road had taught him to be wary of the unexpected, especially on nights like this when the mountains seemed to play tricks on the mind. But something about the woman's posture, the way she gazed down the road as if waiting for something specific, made him slow down. There was a familiarity in her stance that he couldn't quite place, an echo of someone he thought he had forgotten long ago. The trucker's code demanded that you help those in need, but Jack had learned to be cautious. Yet as he approached, he noticed she wasn't frantically waving for help or showing signs of distress. Instead, she stood with an almost serene patience, as if she had been waiting not just for any passing vehicle, but for him specifically. The thought sent an unexpected chill down his spine. Against his better judgment, Jack pulled over, the air brakes hissing as the massive truck came to a stop. He rolled down the passenger window, feeling the cool mountain air rush into the warm cab. "Ma'am, you all right out there? This isn't exactly the safest place to be standing in this weather." She looked up at him, with eyes that seemed to hold depths he couldn't fathom. Even in the dim light of his headlights, he could see she was beautiful in a timeless way, though her exact age was difficult to determine. "I need to get to the Overlook," she said simply, her voice carrying a soft accent he couldn't quite place. "Would you be willing to take me there?" Jack hesitated. The Overlook was a good 15 minutes off the main highway, up a winding dirt road that would be treacherous in this weather. It was a place where locals sometimes went to remember lost loved ones, leaving flowers and small mementos on the rocky promontory that offered a sweeping view of the valley below. "That's quite a ways up a rough road, miss. Are you sure that's where you need to go?" "I'm sure," she replied. And there was something in her tone that made further questions seem inappropriate. She climbed into the cab with surprising grace, settling into the passenger seat as if she had done so many times before. Jack noticed she carried a small bundle of dried flowers tied with a faded blue ribbon, and the sight of them stirred something in his memory that he couldn't quite grasp. As they pulled back onto the highway, Jack stole glances at his unexpected passenger. She sat quietly, looking ahead through the rain-streaked windshield with an expression of quiet determination. There was something unsettling about how she seemed to know the curves of the road before they reached them, how she would lean slightly into turns as if anticipating them. When a particular bend approached, she would murmur softly under her breath, words that sounded like fragments of old songs. "I'm Jack, by the way," he said, trying to break the comfortable but mysterious silence that had settled between them. "Jack Coleman, been driving this route for more years than I care to count." "Emily," she replied simply, not offering a last name. Her attention seemed focused on something beyond the windshield, something only she could see. "You have kind eyes, Jack. I imagine you've helped many people over the years." The comment caught him off guard. It had been a long time since anyone had called him kind, and longer still since he had thought of himself that way. His ex-wife Sarah had left him 5 years ago, taking their daughter Emma with her, claiming that the road had taken more of him than she could bear to lose. Since then, Jack had convinced himself that solitude was simpler, that caring too much only led to disappointment. "I try to help when I can," he said, adjusting his grip on the steering wheel. "Though I have to admit, I don't usually pick up passengers. Something about tonight feels different, though can't quite put my finger on it." Emily turned to look at him for the first time since entering the cab, and Jack felt as if she were seeing something in him that he had forgotten existed. "Sometimes we're exactly where we need to be, even when we don't understand why," she said softly. "Do you believe in destiny?" "Jack?" The question hung in the air between them like the mist outside. Jack had never been one for philosophical discussions, preferring the concrete realities of schedules, routes, and cargo manifests. But something about Emily's presence made him consider possibilities he had long dismissed. "I believe in making your own way," he said finally. "Though I suppose there are moments when it feels like something bigger is pulling the strings." As they climbed higher into the mountains, the rain intensified, and Jack found himself grateful for the company, even if his passenger remained largely silent. There was something comforting about her presence, as if she carried with her a sense of peace that had been missing from his life for too long. The dried flowers in her lap seemed to catch what little light filtered through the cab, and Jack found himself wondering about their significance. The turn-off to the overlook appeared through the darkness like a secret revealed only to those who knew where to look. Jack downshifted carefully, feeling the truck's weight shift as they left the paved highway for the narrow dirt road that wound up through the pine trees. The path was treacherous in the best of conditions, but with the rain turning the earth to mud, it required all of his considerable skill to navigate safely. "You've been here before," Emily observed, and it wasn't a question. "A few times," Jack admitted. "Usually during the day, though. It's a beautiful spot when the weather's clear. You can see for miles across the valley." He paused, then added, "People sometimes come here to remember things. Or people." Emily nodded, as if she understood completely. "Memory is a powerful thing, isn't it? It can keep us connected to what we've lost, but it can also trap us in the past." She clutched the flowers more tightly, and Jack noticed her knuckles were white with the effort. As they reached the overlook, Jack pulled the truck to a stop and engaged the parking brake. The view was obscured by the fog and rain, but he could sense the vast emptiness beyond the edge of the rocky promontory. Emily sat quietly for a moment, as if gathering her courage for what came next. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said finally. "I know it wasn't easy in this weather. Some kindnesses are remembered longer than others, Jack. I hope you know that." There was something in her tone that made Jack feel as if they were saying goodbye, though he couldn't understand why. As Emily prepared to step out into the rain, he found himself reluctant to let her go. For the first time in months, he didn't feel alone, and the prospect of returning to the empty cab filled him with an unexpected sadness. "Will you be all right getting back down?" he asked, though he wasn't sure why he was concerned. There was something about Emily that suggested she was more capable than she appeared. "I'll be fine," she assured him, and Jack believed her completely. Some journeys we have to make alone. As she stepped out into the rain, Jack watched her walk toward the edge of the overlook, the flowers held carefully in her hands. The fog seemed to part around her, and for a moment, Jack could have sworn he saw another figure waiting in the mist. But when he blinked, there was only Emily standing alone against the vast mountain darkness. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. Jack sat in the cab of his truck, engine idling softly as he watched Emily disappear into the swirling mist. The rain drummed against the windshield with increasing intensity, and the wipers struggled to keep up with the deluge. He should have left immediately, should have backed down the treacherous dirt road and returned to the safety of Highway 24, but something kept him rooted to the spot. It was as if an invisible thread connected him to the woman who had vanished into the fog, and breaking that connection felt impossible. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time seemed to move differently up here in the mountains, where the mist created its own reality. Jack found himself studying the dashboard clock, but the green digital numbers seemed to blur together, offering no reliable anchor to the present moment. He reached for his thermos of coffee, hoping the familiar ritual would ground him, but his hands trembled slightly as he unscrewed the cap. The radio, which had been silent since they left the highway, suddenly crackled to life with a burst of static. Jack reached to adjust the frequency, but before he could touch the dial, a melody began to emerge from the speakers. It was an old song, something from decades past, with a haunting quality that made his chest tighten with unexplained emotion. The voice was soft and distant, singing words he couldn't quite make out, but somehow understood on a level deeper than language. "That's impossible," Jack muttered to himself, checking the radio's power indicator. The unit was definitely on, but there was no station identification, no DJ commentary, just the ghostly melody that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the reach of normal radio waves. He tried changing the station, but the song continued uninterrupted, as if it existed in a space that transcended the usual rules of broadcasting. As the music played, Jack's mind began to drift to memories he had long suppressed. He thought of Sarah, his ex-wife, and how she used to hum old songs while cooking dinner in their small apartment. He remembered Emma, his daughter, who would fall asleep to the sound of his voice telling stories about the places he had seen on the road. Those had been simpler times, before the demands of the highway had pulled him away from everything that mattered. The song faded gradually, leaving only the sound of rain and his truck's engine. Jack felt a profound sense of loss, as if something precious had been taken from him. He looked toward the overlook where Emily had gone, but the fog was too thick to see anything clearly. A part of him wanted to follow her, to make sure she was safe, but another part warned him that some boundaries were not meant to be crossed. A soft knock on the passenger door made him jump. Emily stood outside, her hair and dress soaked through, but her expression was peaceful in a way that hadn't been there before. Jack quickly reached over to open the door, and she climbed back into the cab, bringing with her the scent of mountain rain and something else, something like lavender and old roses. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Jack asked, though he wasn't sure why he phrased it that way. She had gone to leave flowers, not to find something, yet the question felt appropriate, as if her journey to the overlook had been about more than a simple memorial. "I did," Emily replied, settling back into her seat. Jack noticed that she no longer carried the bundle of dried flowers, and there was a lightness to her movements that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for waiting. Not everyone would have shown such patience. It didn't feel right to leave you up here alone," Jack said, engaging the truck's gears to begin the careful descent back to the highway. "This road can be dangerous in good weather, let alone in a storm like this." As they navigated the winding dirt path, Jack found himself stealing glances at Emily. In the dim light of the cab, she seemed almost luminous, as if she were lit from within by some inner peace. Her wet hair clung to her face, but instead of looking bedraggled, she appeared ethereal, like a figure from a dream or a half-remembered story. "Tell me about yourself, Jack," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the sound of rain on the roof. "What brought you to the road? What keeps you moving when most people would choose to stay still?" The question caught him off guard. Most passengers, on the rare occasions when he had them, preferred to talk about themselves or simply ride in silence. But Emily's interest seemed genuine, and Jack found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. "I started driving after I got out of the army," he said, carefully maneuvering around a particularly treacherous curve. Seemed like a good way to see the country, to have some freedom. "Sarah, that's my ex-wife. She said I was running from something. But I always thought I was running towards something, just never figured out what." "And what about now?" Emily asked softly. "Do you still feel like you're running towards something?" Jack considered the question carefully. The truth was, he had stopped thinking about destinations years ago. The road had become an end in itself, a place where he could exist without having to face the disappointments and failures that seemed to define his life when he was stationary. "I think I've been running in circles," he admitted. "Maybe that's why tonight feels different, like I'm finally heading somewhere specific." Emily nodded, as if she understood completely. "Sometimes we have to lose our way before we can find where we're meant to be. The road has been good to you, Jack, even when it felt like it was taking things away. It brought you to me tonight, didn't it?" There was something in her tone that made Jack look at her more carefully. In the shifting light of the dashboard, her features seemed to blur and clarify in ways that defied logical explanation. One moment she appeared to be a woman in her 30s. The next, she seemed older, as if time itself were uncertain about how to define her. "Can I ask you something?" Jack said as they finally reached the paved highway. "How did you know I would stop? I mean, plenty of drivers would have kept going, especially on a night like this." Emily was quiet for a long moment, and Jack began to wonder if she had heard the question. Then, just as he was about to repeat it, she spoke. "Some people carry light with them, even when they don't realize it. You're one of those people, Jack. I could see it from the moment you slowed down." The comment made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain. He had never thought of himself as someone who carried light. If anything, he felt like he'd been moving through increasing darkness for years, distancing himself from anything that might illuminate the mistakes and regrets that followed him like shadows. "I don't feel very light," he said honestly. "Most days I feel like I'm carrying more weight than my truck." "That's because you've been carrying it alone," Emily replied. "Some burdens are meant to be shared, Jack. Some stories are meant to be told. You've been driving these roads for so long, but you've never really let anyone ride with you. Not really." Her words struck him with surprising force. It was true that he had become increasingly isolated over the years, preferring the company of his own thoughts to the complications that came with letting others too close. But sitting here with Emily, he realized how hungry he had been for real connection, for someone who could see past the careful walls he had built around himself. "What about you?" he asked, turning the conversation back to her. "What's your story? What brought you to that roadside tonight?" Emily smiled, but there was a sadness in it that made Jack's chest tighten. "I've been waiting for someone to ask that question for a very long time," she said, "but I'm not sure you're ready for the answer." "Not yet?" The mysterious response only deepened Jack's curiosity, but something in Emily's expression warned him not to push. They drove in comfortable silence for several miles, the rain beginning to ease as they descended toward the valley floor. The radio remained silent, but Jack could still hear echoes of that haunting melody in his mind. As they approached the lights of the next town, Emily suddenly spoke again. "Jack, I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens next, whatever you see or hear, remember that some things are true even when they don't make sense. Can you do that for me?" The request sent a chill down Jack's spine, but he found himself nodding. "I promise," he said, though he wasn't sure what he was promising to do. Emily reached over and placed her hand on his arm, and Jack felt a warmth that seemed to spread through his entire body. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. You've given me something I didn't dare hope for." As they entered the town limits, Jack realized that their journey together was far from over. Whatever Emily needed from him, whatever role he was meant to play in her story, he was ready to see it through to the end. The road had brought them together for a reason, and for the first time in years, Jack felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The small town of Copper Creek appeared through the windshield like a collection of amber jewels scattered across the valley floor. Street lights created pools of warm illumination in the darkness, and Jack could make out the familiar shapes of the diner, gas station, and handful of modest homes that comprised the community. It was a place where time seemed to move more slowly, where the modern world felt distant and less important than the simple rhythms of mountain life. Emily directed him to pull into the parking lot of Murphy's Diner, a weathered building that had been serving travelers and locals for longer than Jack could remember. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting pink and blue shadows across the wet asphalt. Through the large windows, Jack could see a few late-night patrons hunched over coffee cups, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of the interior lights. "This is where I need to be," Emily said. But she made no move to get out of the truck. Instead, she sat quietly, studying the diner as if seeing it for the first time, or perhaps remembering it from long ago. "Would you come in with me, Jack? I think there's something you need to see." Jack hesitated. He had been planning to grab a quick meal and continue on his route, but something in Emily's tone made it clear that this wasn't a casual invitation. "Sure," he said, shutting off the engine. "I could use some coffee anyway." They walked across the parking lot together, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Emily seemed to know exactly where she was going, leading Jack to a booth in the back corner of the diner, away from the other customers. The red vinyl seats were cracked with age, and the formica table showed the wear of countless meals and conversations. It was the kind of place that held memories in its very walls. Dolores Murphy, the diner's owner and a fixture in Copper Creek for over 30 years, approached their table with the easy familiarity of someone who had seen it all. She was a round woman with silver hair and kind eyes, the type of person who remembered how everyone liked their coffee and asked about their families by name. "Well, hello there, Jack," she said warmly, setting down 2 steaming mugs without being asked. "Haven't seen you in here for a while. How's the road been treating you?" "Can't complain, Dolores," Jack replied, grateful for the normalcy of the interaction. "Just passing through as usual." Dolores turned to Emily with a smile that faltered slightly, as if she were trying to place a face that seemed familiar but couldn't quite remember where she had seen it before. "And you, honey, you look like you could use something warm. This weather's been something else tonight." "Just coffee." "And thank you," Emily said softly. "This is a lovely place. It feels like it holds a lot of stories." "Oh, it does," Dolores said, her expression brightening. 40 years I've been running this place, and I swear these walls could write a book if they could talk. Truckers, tourists, locals, everyone passes through here eventually." She paused, studying Emily more carefully. "You know, you remind me of someone. Can't quite put my finger on it. But there's something familiar about you." Emily smiled but didn't respond directly. After Dolores moved on to tend to other customers, she leaned forward across the table, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Jack, I need to show you something, but I need you to promise me that you'll keep an open mind about what you're about to see." Jack felt a familiar flutter of unease in his stomach, but he nodded. "I already promised you that, remember." Whatever happens, I'll try to understand. Emily reached into a small purse that Jack was surprised to realize she had been carrying all along. He had been so focused on the flowers she had taken to the overlook that he hadn't noticed the delicate beaded bag that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. From it, she withdrew a photograph, yellowed with age and worn at the edges from years of handling. "This was taken here," she said, sliding the photograph across the table. "In this very booth, actually, June 15th, 1962. Jack picked up the photograph with careful hands, immediately struck by the quality of the image despite its age. It showed a young couple sitting in what was unmistakably the same booth where they now sat, though the diner's decor had been subtly different back then. The woman was beautiful, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths of emotion. She wore a wine-colored dress that Jack recognized immediately. It was the same dress Emily was wearing now, down to the smallest detail. The man beside her was young and handsome, with calloused hands and a gentle smile. He wore a simple work shirt and had his arm around the woman's shoulders in a gesture that spoke of deep affection and contentment. On the table between them sat 2 coffee cups and a small bundle of flowers tied with a blue ribbon. "That's me," Emily said simply, pointing to the woman in the photograph. "And that's Luis. We were engaged to be married that summer." Jack stared at the photograph, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The woman in the picture was undeniably Emily, but the photograph was clearly more than 60 years old. Yet Emily appeared to be no older than 35, perhaps 40 at most. The mathematical impossibility of it made his head spin. "I don't understand," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "This photo is from 1962. That would make you—" "I know how it looks," Emily interrupted gently. "I know it doesn't make sense according to the world you understand. But I told you some things are true even when they don't make sense. This is one of those things." Jack set the photograph down carefully, his hands trembling slightly. He looked around the diner, half expecting to find that he was dreaming or hallucinating, but everything appeared normal. Dolores was refilling coffee cups at the counter, a trucker in a corner booth was studying a road map, and the radio was playing soft country music. Only Emily seemed to exist in a different reality, one where time followed different rules. "Who was Luis?" Jack asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Emily's expression softened, and for a moment she looked exactly like the young woman in the photograph. He was a trucker, like you, drove the mountain routes, carrying supplies to the mining camps and small towns. He was supposed to meet me here that night, June 15th. We were going to finalize the wedding plans, maybe even elope if we felt brave enough. But he didn't come, Jack said, the pieces of the story beginning to form a picture he didn't want to complete. "He never made it," Emily confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "The road claimed him that night, just like it had claimed so many others. A curve he had taken hundreds of times before, but the rain made it treacherous. His truck went off the road near the overlook where you took me tonight." Jack felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "That's where you left the flowers," he said, understanding beginning to dawn. That's why you needed to go there." Emily nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I've been waiting for him, Jack. All these years I've been waiting. Not just for him to come back. I knew that was impossible, but for someone to help me understand why it happened. Why he was taken from me when we had so much life left to live together." The weight of her words settled over Jack like a heavy blanket. He thought of all the nights he had driven these same roads, all the curves and straightaways that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. How many other stories were hidden in the mountains? How many other loves had been interrupted by the unforgiving nature of the highway? "Emily," he said carefully, "I need you to help me understand something. If this photograph is from 1962 and Luis, if he's been gone all these years, then how are you here? How are you still young?" she finished for him. "You're still waiting." She picked up the photograph and held it gently, as if it were made of the most fragile glass. Love is a powerful thing, Jack. It can transcend time, space, even the natural order of things. I've been caught between worlds all these years, unable to move forward but unwilling to let go. Jack stared at her, his rational mind rebelling against what he was hearing, while his heart recognized the truth in her words. He had felt it from the moment he saw her standing on the roadside. There was something otherworldly about Emily, something that didn't quite fit with the normal rules of existence. "What do you need from me?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. He should have been running from this situation, should have been questioning his sanity. But instead he found himself wanting to help her, to be part of whatever resolution she was seeking. Emily reached across the table and took his hand, and Jack felt that same warmth he'd experienced in the truck, a sensation that seemed to reach into the deepest parts of his soul. "I need you to help me find peace," she said simply. "I need someone who understands the road, who knows its dangers and its gifts, to help me say goodbye." As they sat in the diner, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of late-night conversation and clinking coffee cups, Jack realized that his life had just taken a turn he never could have anticipated. The photograph lay between them on the table, a bridge between past and present, between the world he knew and the one Emily inhabited. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Jack stared at their joined hands on the table, marveling at how real Emily's touch felt despite the impossibility of her story. The warmth that radiated from her skin seemed to chase away the chill that had settled in his bones during their mountain journey. Around them, the diner continued its late-night rhythm, but Jack felt as if he and Emily existed in a bubble of heightened reality where normal rules had been suspended. "I don't know how to help you," he said honestly, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm just a truck driver, Emily. I move cargo from one place to another. I don't know anything about situations like this." Emily squeezed his hand gently, and Jack felt a surge of confidence he hadn't experienced in years. "You know more than you think," she said softly. "You understand the road, Jack. You know how it can give and take in the same moment. You've felt its power, haven't you? The way it can make you feel free and trapped at the same time." Jack nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in her words. How many nights had he driven these mountain highways, feeling like he was escaping something, only to realize he was carrying his problems with him wherever he went? How many times had he found solace in the endless ribbon of asphalt, only to feel more alone than ever when he finally stopped? "Tell me about Luis," he said, settling back in the booth. "What was he like? What made you fall in love with him?" Emily's expression softened, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the young woman in the photograph. "He was gentle," she said, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. "Strong, but gentle. He had these hands that could fix anything, engines, broken fence posts, even broken hearts. He used to say that the road was just another problem to be solved, 1 mile at a time." She paused, staring out the window at the parking lot, where Jack's truck sat like a metal giant in the darkness. He loved the mountains, loved the way they made him feel small but important at the same time. He said driving through them was like having a conversation with God, that every curve was a question and every straightaway was an answer. Jack felt a strange kinship with this man he had never met, this ghost from 1962, who had shared the same roads, the same challenges, the same relationship with the highway that defined both their lives. "He sounds like a good man," he said simply. "He was," Emily confirmed. "He was going to take a job in Denver after we married, something safer, more predictable, but he never got the chance to make that choice." She looked directly at Jack, and he saw decades of pain and longing in her eyes. "Do you know what it's like to love someone so much that you can't imagine existing without them?" The question hit Jack like a physical blow. He thought of Sarah, of Emma, of all the relationships he had let slip away because he couldn't figure out how to balance his need for the road with his need for human connection. "I thought I did," he said quietly. "But maybe I was just afraid of finding out." Emily studied his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You're carrying guilt, aren't you? About the people you've left behind, the chances you didn't take." Jack's first instinct was to deflect, to change the subject back to her story, but something about Emily's presence made honesty feel not just possible, but necessary. "My daughter," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "Emma, she's 15 now, and I barely know her. Sarah, my ex-wife, she was right about me. I chose the road over them, and now Emma probably thinks I'm just the guy who sends birthday cards and misses school plays. But you're here now," Emily said gently. "You stopped for me tonight when you could have kept driving. That tells me something about who you really are, Jack. Maybe it's time to stop running and start returning to the things that matter." The words struck him with surprising force. For years, Jack had convinced himself that his solitary existence was a choice, a preference for independence over the messy complications of relationships. But sitting here with Emily, he realized that he had been running from responsibility, from the fear of failing the people he loved most. "How do I even begin to fix something like that?" he asked, genuine desperation creeping into his voice. "It's been 5 years since the divorce. Emma probably doesn't even want me in her life anymore." Emily smiled, and Jack caught a glimpse of the woman she had been in 1962, full of hope and dreams for the future. "Love doesn't have an expiration date, Jack. It might get buried under hurt and disappointment, but it doesn't disappear. Your daughter needs her father, even if she doesn't know how to tell you that." Before Jack could respond, Dolores approached their table again, this time carrying a worn photo album that looked like it had seen decades of handling. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, setting the album down gently, "but seeing you two together reminded me of something. This might sound crazy, but would you mind taking a look at this?" She opened the album to a page near the middle, and Jack's breath caught in his throat. There, mounted carefully on the yellowed paper, was another photograph from 1962. It showed the same young couple from Emily's picture, but this one was taken outside the diner. Luis had his arm around Emily's waist, and both were laughing at something off camera. The joy in their faces was so genuine, so pure, that Jack felt his chest tighten with emotion. "My grandmother took this picture," Dolores explained, her voice soft with memory. "She used to tell stories about this young couple who would come in here all the time. Said they were so in love, it made everyone around them believe in fairy tales again." She looked at Emily with growing recognition. "You look so much like her, honey. It's uncanny." Emily touched the photograph gently, and Jack watched as tears began to slide down her cheeks. "She was beautiful," she whispered. "They both were." Dolores nodded, seemingly unaware of the deeper significance of what she was showing them. "Grandmother always said it was tragic what happened to them. The young man had an accident on the mountain road, and the girl just disappeared after that. No one ever saw her again. Some folks said she moved away to start over. But grandmother always believed she died of a broken heart." Jack felt the pieces of Emily's story clicking into place with devastating clarity. She hadn't just been waiting all these years. She had been caught in a kind of limbo, unable to move forward, without understanding why their love had been cut short, unable to let go of the life they had planned together. "Would you mind if we kept this picture for a little while?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. "I promise we'll bring it back." Dolores looked uncertain for a moment, then nodded. "Of course, honey, just take care of it, okay? It's one of the last things I have from grandmother." After Dolores left them alone again, Emily and Jack sat in silence, both photographs now lying on the table between them like pieces of a puzzle that was finally beginning to make sense. Jack realized that he was no longer questioning the impossible nature of Emily's presence. Instead, he was beginning to understand that some forces were stronger than death, stronger than time, stronger than the rational explanations that governed everyday life. "I think I know why you're still here," he said finally. "And I think I know why I was the one who stopped for you tonight." Emily looked up from the photographs, hope flickering in her eyes. "Tell me." "You've been waiting for forgiveness," Jack said. The understanding coming to him with sudden clarity. "Not from Luis. He wouldn't blame you for what happened to him. But you've been blaming yourself all these years, thinking that somehow you could have prevented it, that your love should have been enough to keep him safe." Emily's tears came harder now, decades of suppressed grief finally finding its voice. "If I had asked him to stay that night," she sobbed. "If I had told him the roads were too dangerous. If I had been a better reason for him to be careful." "No," Jack said firmly, reaching across the table to take both her hands. "Emily, listen to me. I've been driving these roads for over 20 years. I've seen what the mountains can do, how quickly conditions can change. What happened to Luis wasn't your fault. It was just one of those terrible things that happen sometimes. No matter how much we love someone or how careful we try to be." Emily looked at him through her tears, and Jack could see the war between hope and despair playing out in her expression. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've been carrying the same guilt," Jack admitted. "Different circumstances, but the same weight. I've been blaming myself for the failure of my marriage, for Emma growing up without me, for every choice I made that put the road ahead of the people I loved. But sitting here with you, helping you understand that Luis's accident wasn't your fault, I'm starting to see that maybe my failures weren't entirely my fault either. Maybe sometimes people just make the best choices they can with what they know at the time." Emily squeezed his hands tightly, and Jack felt something shift in the air between them, as if an invisible burden was beginning to lift. "You really believe that?" she asked. "I'm starting to," Jack said honestly. "And I think that's why we found each other tonight. You needed someone who understood the road, who could help you see that love doesn't make us responsible for preventing every tragedy. And I needed someone who could show me that it's never too late to choose differently, to put the people we love ahead of our own fears." They sat together in the quiet diner. Two souls who had been carrying impossible weights, finally beginning to understand that forgiveness of others and themselves was not just possible, but necessary. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the first hints of dawn were beginning to touch the edges of the mountains. Jack realized that this night, which had begun as just another routine drive, had become something transformative, something that would change the direction of his life forever. "Oh, what happens now?" he asked softly. "How do we help you find the peace you've been looking for?" Emily smiled through her tears, and for the first time since he had picked her up, Jack could see genuine hope in her expression. "I think we've already started," she said. "But there's one more thing I need to do, one more place I need you to take me." Jack nodded without hesitation. Whatever Emily needed, wherever the road would take them next. He was ready to see this journey through to its conclusion. For the first time in years, he felt like he was driving towards something instead of away from it, and that made all the difference in the world. Dawn was beginning to paint the eastern sky in soft shades of pink and gold as Jack and Emily left Murphy's diner. The storm had passed, leaving the mountain air crisp and clean, with droplets of water clinging to every surface like tiny crystals. Jack felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years as he helped Emily into the truck, both photographs now carefully tucked into her delicate purse. "Where to now?" he asked, settling behind the wheel and starting the engine. The familiar rumble seemed different somehow, more purposeful, as if the truck itself understood the importance of their mission. "The old railway tunnel," Emily said, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of their conversation in the diner. "The one about 15 miles up Highway 24. There's something there I need you to see. something that will help you understand the rest of the story. Jack knew the tunnel well. It was a landmark that many drivers used as a reference point on the winding mountain route. Built in the early 1900s for the mining railroad, it had been abandoned for decades, but remained a testament to the determination of those who had carved their way through the unforgiving landscape. What he didn't understand was why Emily needed to go there, but he had learned to trust her guidance. As they drove through the awakening landscape, Jack found himself studying Emily in the growing light. The ethereal quality that had surrounded her in the darkness was still there. But now he could see details that had been hidden before. There was a timeless quality to her features, as if she existed in a space between decades, carrying the beauty of her youth while bearing the wisdom of years spent waiting. "Jack," she said softly as they approached the tunnel, "I need to prepare you for what you're about to learn. The story I've told you is true, but it's not complete. There are pieces I haven't shared because I wasn't sure you were ready to hear them." A chill ran down Jack's spine, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm ready now. Whatever it is, I can handle it." Emily guided him to a pullout near the tunnel entrance, a small gravel area where tourists sometimes stopped to take photographs of the historical marker. As Jack parked the truck, he noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. There, partially hidden by overgrown brush, was a small memorial cross made of weathered iron. Even from a distance, he could see that it bore an inscription. "That's where it happened," Emily said quietly, following his gaze. June 15th, 1962. Luis was driving through here around midnight, heading to meet me at the diner. The rain that night was worse than what we experienced tonight, and the road was treacherous. His truck skidded on a curve just before the tunnel entrance. Jack felt his chest tighten as he imagined the scene. A young man eager to see the woman he loved, probably driving a little too fast for the conditions, probably thinking about their wedding plans and their future together. One moment of inattention, one patch of slick asphalt, and everything changed forever. They walked together to the memorial cross, their footsteps crunching on the gravel, up close. Jack could read the inscription clearly: Luis Fernando Reyes, 1940-1962. The road took you, but love keeps you. Below the dates, in smaller letters, were the words, "Forever in my heart, Emily." "You put this here," Jack said, though it wasn't really a question. "Not immediately," Emily replied, kneeling beside the cross and running her fingers over the weathered metal. "It took me years to find the courage to come back to this place. But eventually, I realized that avoiding it wasn't helping either of us. This is where his journey ended, but it's also where mine had to begin again." Jack knelt beside her, studying the memorial more carefully. Behind the cross, he noticed something else, a small metal box, partially buried and protected by a piece of canvas. "What's that?" he asked. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she uncovered the box. "Letters," she said simply. "Every week for the past 60 years, I've written him a letter about my day, about the things I've seen, about how much I miss him. I never knew where to send them, so I brought them here." She opened the box carefully, revealing hundreds of envelopes, all addressed in the same careful handwriting: Luis Reyes, wherever love lives forever. Some of the older letters showed signs of age and weather, but they had been lovingly preserved, each one representing another week of waiting. Another week of hope that somehow he would receive her words. "Emily," Jack said softly, understanding beginning to dawn. "How long have you been coming here? I mean, really coming here, as yourself?" Emily looked at him with eyes that held the weight of decades. "Every week since 1962, she said simply. "I know how impossible that sounds, but it's true. I've watched this place change, watched the road evolve, watched generation after generation of travelers pass through, but I never aged, never moved on, never found peace. I've been trapped in that moment when I lost him. unable to let go. Jack stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she was telling him. According to her story, Emily had been maintaining this vigil for over 60 years, yet she appeared to be no older than she had been in the 1962 photographs. It defied every law of nature he understood. Yet the evidence was right in front of him. "How is that possible?" he whispered. "Love," Emily said simply. "Love so strong that it refused to accept finality. Love so deep that it created its own reality. I should have passed on decades ago, Jackie, but I couldn't leave him here alone. I couldn't accept that our story ended with his accident." She reached into the box and pulled out the most recent letter, dated just 1 week earlier. But writing letters wasn't enough," she continued. "I needed to understand why it happened. I needed to find someone who could help me see that his accident wasn't a cruel twist of fate, but just life. Random and unpredictable and sometimes heartbreaking, but not personal. Not a punishment for loving too much." Jack felt tears forming in his eyes as the full magnitude of Emily's story became clear. She had been trapped in an endless cycle of grief and guilt, unable to move forward because she couldn't accept that sometimes terrible things happened for no reason at all. And somehow, miraculously, she had been given the chance to find peace through helping him understand his own need for forgiveness. "You've been waiting for me," he said, the realization hitting him like a thunderbolt. "Not just for someone like me, but specifically for me. Someone who would understand both the road and the weight of regret." Emily nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. "I think so, yes. I think the universe, or God, or whatever force governs these things, knew that I needed to help someone else find their way before I could find mine. You stopped for me tonight because you were meant to stop, Jack. We were meant to find each other." They knelt together beside Luis's memorial as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Two souls who had been lost in their own forms of limbo, finally beginning to understand the path to redemption. Jack realized that this encounter had changed him fundamentally, not just his understanding of the supernatural, but his understanding of what mattered most in life. "What happens now?" he asked, echoing his question from the diner, but with a deeper understanding of its implications. Emily smiled through her tears, and Jack saw something in her expression that hadn't been there before, a lightness, a sense of completion. "Now we both go home," she said. "You to your daughter, who needs you more than you know, and me to wherever people go when they finally learn to let go with love instead of holding on with fear." As she spoke, Jack noticed that Emily seemed to be becoming more translucent, as if the morning light were beginning to shine through her. The sight should have terrified him, but instead he felt a profound sense of peace. Emily was finally ready to complete her journey, and he was finally ready to begin his. "Will I see you again?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Every time you choose love over fear," Emily said softly, "every time you forgive yourself for being human, every time you remember that some things are worth more than the safety of staying on the road forever." Jack reached out to touch her hand one last time, and felt the same warmth he had experienced throughout their journey together. In that touch, he understood that Emily's gift to him wasn't just the recognition of his own need for forgiveness. It was the courage to finally turn his truck around and drive toward home instead of away from it. As Emily began to fade in the growing morning light, Jack felt a desperate need to understand everything before she disappeared forever. The rational part of his mind still struggled with the impossibility of what he was witnessing, but his heart had long since accepted the truth of their encounter. Emily was more than a lost soul seeking peace. She was a messenger, a guide sent to help him find his way back to what mattered most. "Wait," he said urgently, reaching out as if he could somehow anchor her to this world through the force of his will. "There's something I need to tell you before you go. Something I need you to know." Emily paused in her transformation, her form solidifying slightly as she focused on his words. "What is it, Jack?" "I think I understand now why Luis couldn't make it to the diner that night," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "It wasn't just the rain or the dangerous road. It was timing, cosmic timing. If he had lived, if you two had gotten married and lived your normal lives together, you wouldn't have been here tonight to save me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Emily's eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like wonder. "What do you mean?" Jack stood up, pacing a few steps away from the memorial before turning back to face her. "I was planning to quit, Emily. After this run, I was going to sell my truck, find some dead-end job, and disappear completely. I convinced myself that Emma and Sarah were better off without me, that I had caused enough damage to their lives. I was going to give up entirely." The words came pouring out of him now. 60 years of Emily's patient waiting suddenly making perfect sense. "But you showed me something tonight that I had forgotten. That love doesn't die just because we make mistakes. That it's never too late to choose differently. To be the person we were meant to be instead of the person we think we deserve to be." Emily moved closer to him, and even in her translucent state, Jack could feel the warmth of her presence. "You're going to call Emma," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm going to do more than that," Jack said firmly. "I'm going to drive straight to Denver, to Sarah's house. And I'm going to tell my daughter that her father made some terrible choices, but that he loves her more than life itself. I'm going to ask for the chance to be the dad she deserves, even if it means giving up the road entirely." Tears were streaming down Emily's face now, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Oh, Jack," she whispered, "do you see? Do you understand what this means?" Jack felt a sudden jolt of recognition, as if a piece of a cosmic puzzle had just clicked into place. "Luis's accident wasn't a tragedy," he said slowly, working through the revelation as he spoke. "It was a sacrifice. He gave up his earthly life so that you could be here tonight, so that you could save mine. And by saving mine, you saved Emma's chance to have her father back." Emily nodded, her entire being beginning to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with the sunrise. Love creates ripples. Jack, actions we take, choices we make, they echo through time in ways we never imagine. Luis and I didn't get to have our wedding, our children, our life together in the way we planned. But our love created something else, the chance for other families to be healed, other hearts to be mended. Jack felt his knees weaken as the full magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. "You've been waiting all these years, not just to find peace for yourself, but to fulfill a purpose, to be exactly where you needed to be tonight, at exactly the right moment, to save someone else's family. And now I can rest," Emily said softly, her form becoming so translucent that Jack could see the memorial cross through her chest. "Because the circle is complete. The love that Luis and I shared, the love that was interrupted but never destroyed, has found a way to continue in the world. Through you, through Emma, through the choices you'll make from this moment forward." Jack wanted to protest, wanted to beg her to stay, to continue being the friend and guide he had never known he needed, but he understood now that Emily's peace depended on his willingness to let her go, to carry forward the lessons she had taught him without clinging to her presence. "What should I tell Emma about tonight?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How do I explain how I changed? How I found the courage to come home?" Emily smiled, and in that smile Jack saw not just the woman she had been in 1962, but the spirit she had become through decades of patient love. "Tell her that sometimes angels come in the form of strangers who need our help," she said. "Tell her that love is the strongest force in the universe, stronger than time, stronger than regret, stronger than the fear that keeps us running from the people we care about most." She reached into her purse one final time and withdrew something Jack hadn't seen before. A small, heart-shaped locket, on a delicate chain. "This was Luis's wedding gift to me," she said, holding it out to him. "I want you to give it to Emma. Tell her it's from someone who believes in second chances. Someone who knows that the greatest adventures happen when we stop running and start returning." Jack took the locket with trembling hands, feeling the weight of its significance. The metal was warm to the touch, as if it had been resting against Emily's heart for all these years. Inside, he knew, would be a photograph of Luis, a reminder that love transcends the boundaries of life and time. "I'll tell her," he promised, clutching the locket tightly. "I'll tell her everything, and I'll make sure she knows that the love her grandparents never got to share found a way to bring her father back to her." Emily's form was becoming increasingly ethereal now, but her voice remained clear and strong. "Jack, one more thing. When you see Luis again, and you will someday, when your own journey on the road is complete, tell him I said thank you. Thank him for loving me enough to let me go, for trusting me to fulfill the purpose our love was meant to serve." "I will," Jack said, though he wasn't sure how he would recognize Luis when that time came. But somehow, he knew Emily was right. There would be a reunion, a moment when all the pieces of this cosmic puzzle would finally come together in perfect understanding. As Emily began to fade completely, Jack felt an overwhelming urge to memorize every detail of her face. To hold on to this moment when two souls had found each other across the impossible divide between worlds. But more than that, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the gift she had given him, not just the courage to go home, but the understanding that love never truly ends. It simply transforms into new opportunities for grace. "Goodbye, Emily," he whispered as her form became one with the morning light. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for believing that redemption was possible." Her final words came to him on the mountain breeze, soft but unmistakable. "Thank you for stopping, Jack. Thank you for remembering that sometimes the most important cargo we carry isn't in our trailers, it's in our hearts." And then she was gone, leaving only the memorial cross, the box of letters, and the warm weight of the locket in Jack's palm. But for the first time in years, Jack didn't feel alone. He felt connected to Emily and Luis, to Emma and Sarah, to every traveler who had ever found themselves lost on the highway of life and discovered that the way home had been there all along, waiting for the courage to turn around. 3 hours later, Jack stood on the front porch of a modest 2-story house in suburban Denver, his heart pounding with a mixture of terror and hope. The locket Emily had given him rested in his shirt pocket, its warmth a constant reminder of the promise he had made beside Luis's memorial. In his other hand, he held his cell phone, Sarah's number displayed on the screen, his thumb hovering over the call button. The drive from the mountain tunnel had passed in a blur of revelation and determination. Jack had stopped only once, at a truck stop, where he had called his dispatcher to explain that he was taking an indefinite leave of absence. The conversation had been brief and professional, but as he hung up the phone, Jack felt as if he were shedding an old skin, leaving behind the version of himself that had used the road as an escape from responsibility. Now, standing in the morning sunlight outside the home where his daughter lived, Jack struggled to find the words that would bridge 5 years of absence and hurt. How do you apologize for choosing loneliness over love? How do you explain that sometimes it takes a ghost from 1962 to teach you what really matters in life? Before he could lose his nerve, Jack pressed the call button. Sarah answered on the second ring, her voice cautious but not unfriendly. "Jack, is everything okay? You never call this early." "Sarah, I need to see Emma," he said without preamble. "I know I don't have the right to ask. I know I've been a terrible father, but I need to see our daughter. Today. Now, if possible." There was a long pause, and Jack could hear the sound of morning conversation in the background. Emma getting ready for school, probably, living the normal teenage life that he had missed so much of. "Jack, what's happened?" You sound different. I met someone last night, Jack said, then immediately realized how that sounded. Not like that, Sarah. I met someone who helped me understand some things about myself. About what I've been running from all these years. I can't explain it over the phone, but I need to try to make things right with Emma. I need to try to be the father she deserves. Another pause, shorter this time. She's getting ready for school, Jack. Saturday would be better. Please, Jack interrupted, surprised by the desperation in his own voice. I know it's not convenient. I know I should have called ahead, but I'm afraid if I wait, I'll lose my nerve. I'll go back to making excuses about why it's better for everyone if I stay away. Sarah, I'm standing on your front porch right now, and I'm not leaving until I've talked to our daughter. Through the front window, Jack saw a curtain move slightly. A moment later, the front door opened and Sarah appeared, still wearing her bathrobe, her hair mussed from sleep. She looked older than he remembered, but still beautiful in the way that had first attracted him 20 years ago. Behind her, Jack caught a glimpse of Emma, tall, dark-haired, with his eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin. Dad? Emma's voice was small, uncertain, and Jack felt his heart break at the sound of it. When had she gotten so grown up? When had she stopped being the little girl who used to climb into his truck cab and pretend to drive? Hi, sweetheart, Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. I know this is unexpected, and I know I have a lot of explaining to do, but I was hoping we could talk, just for a little while. Emma looked to her mother for guidance, and Jack saw something pass between them. A silent conversation about trust and second chances and the complicated mathematics of family love. Finally, Sarah stepped aside, allowing Jack to enter the home he had never really shared with them. The living room was warm and comfortable, filled with photographs of Emma's school events, soccer games, and birthday parties, a timeline of the life Jack had missed. He sat carefully on the edge of the couch, acutely aware that he was a guest in what should have been his daughter's refuge from the world. Emma, he began, then stopped, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he needed to say. I want to start by apologizing, not just for missing your birthday last month, or for not being at your soccer games, but for making you feel like you weren't important enough to keep me home. Because you were. You are. You're the most important thing in my life, and I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out how to show you that. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, studying her father with the serious expression of someone much older than 15. Why now? She asked simply. What changed? Jack reached into his pocket and withdrew Emily's locket, holding it so that Emma could see the delicate engraving on its surface. I met someone last night who taught me that love doesn't disappear just because we make mistakes, that it's never too late to choose to be better than we were. He told them everything then, about finding Emily on the roadside, about the photographs from 1962, about the memorial cross and the box of letters. He told them about Luis's sacrifice and Emily's 60-year vigil, about the cosmic timing that had brought them together at exactly the moment when Jack needed to understand that running away was never the answer. Sarah listened with growing amazement, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just letting Jack's story unfold in all its impossible beauty. Emma remained silent until Jack finished, her young face serious with the effort of processing what she had heard. Do you believe it really happened? Emma asked finally. Or do you think maybe you were just, I don't know, tired or something? Jack smiled, remembering Emily's words about some things being true even when they don't make sense. I have this, he said, offering Emma the locket, and I have the certainty that I'm sitting here with you instead of driving toward another lonely truck stop somewhere. Whether Emily was a ghost or an angel, or just a very special person who needed help, she changed my life. She reminded me that you were worth coming home for, Emma took the locket with careful hands, opening it to reveal a small photograph of Luis in his work shirt, smiling at the camera with the same gentle expression Jack had seen in the diner picture. "He looks kind," she said softly. "He was," Jack said, "and so was she. They taught me that love is stronger than fear, stronger than regret, is stronger than the distance I've been keeping between us." Emma looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Does this mean you're going to stay? Are you going to stop driving?" Jack glanced at Sarah, seeing in her expression a cautious hope that matched his own. "I'm going to try," he said honestly. "I've already told my company I'm taking a leave of absence. I want to find a job here in Denver, something that will let me be present for your life instead of just visiting it occasionally." "What if you get restless?" Sarah asked quietly. "What if you start missing the road?" "Then I'll remember Emily," Jack said simply. "I'll remember that some things are worth more than the freedom to run away. I'll remember that the most important journey I can take is the one that brings me closer to the people I love." Emma stood up suddenly and crossed to where Jack sat, wrapping her arms around him in a hug that felt like forgiveness and hope and second chances all rolled into one. "I missed you, Dad," she whispered against his shoulder. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, sweetheart," Jack said, holding his daughter close and feeling the weight of 5 years of regret finally beginning to lift. "But I'm here now, and if you'll let me, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for the time we lost." As they held each other in the morning light streaming through the windows, Jack felt Emily's presence one last time, not as a visible spirit, but as a warm certainty that love really could transcend time and space and the mistakes that kept families apart. Somewhere in the mountains, beside a weathered memorial cross, 2 souls had finally found their peace. And here in a Denver living room, a father and daughter were beginning the long, beautiful process of finding their way back to each other. The highway would always be there, stretching endlessly toward distant horizons. But Jack Coleman had finally learned that the most important destination wasn't somewhere down the road. It was right here, in the arms of the daughter who had never stopped believing that her father would eventually find his way home. End of story. Dear friends, we hope that Jack and Emily's story has touched your hearts the way it touched ours. Like the locket that connected past and present, we believe that every story we share creates invisible threads that bind us together across time and distance. If this tale of second chances and supernatural love has moved you, we invite you to become part of our community of storytellers and dreamers. Subscribe to our channel and join thousands of listeners who understand that the most powerful journeys happen not on highways, but in the landscape of the human heart. Share with us in the comments. Have you ever had an encounter that changed your life's direction? Have you experienced a moment when the impossible seemed not just possible, but necessary? Your stories matter to us, and they matter to fellow travelers who might need to hear that redemption is always within reach. Hit that notification bell to never miss our weekly tales of love, loss, and the miraculous moments that remind us we're never truly alone on life's winding roads. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most important cargo we carry isn't in our trailers, it's in our hearts.